But I just want to share with you one very quick anecdote before we get into the panel about another trip that I took with actually two people who have been here in the audience, Charlie and Nasser Bunderland, very good close friends of mine, who were other people who introduced me to Kyrgyzstan. Back in 1998, I was attending what seemed to be a very boring conference on city managers, about city redevelopment. And they took me on a rather, let's just say, every bone-shattering ride in an old Jeep to Lake Issyk. And all the way, Charlie kept telling me it was worth every pain that I was feeling of every stone on the road, and that I would be in for an amazing treat. And it was the first time in my entire life that I have seen and saw the Milky Way. And if you have been to Issyk, I just hope there's not big spotlights on the beach there now. This was one of those places where there's no light pollution. It's one of the most beautiful spots on the entire planet. And for the first time in my life, I saw all of the stars and the Milky Way. And I think that's the metaphor for Kyrgyzstan. It's worth every bone-shattering experience on the road to development that Ambassador Toktagul laid out. There are many potholes. Sometimes, there's a risk of running off the road, but the Milky Way is in sight. So I think that hopefully Kyrgyzstan will continue on its bright future, but not too bright on the beaches of Issyk. And for those of you who haven't visited, it's worth every moment. I'm now going to turn over for possibly a less starry-eyed presentation, but policy is always about the pragmatic, even though we always have the sense of the possibilities in the universe of life. To our lead speaker, Nisha Bishwal, the Deputy Secretary for Central and South Asian Affairs, who has to, Assistant Secretary of State, who has to actually rush off meeting after this panel. So, Nisha, we're very grateful that you're able to squeeze this into a very busy schedule today, and we very much look forward to your thoughts on how this looks from the perception of the state to come.
Well, thank you, Fiona, and it's actually such a tremendous pleasure and an honor to be here to mark this occasion. It is easy to get starry-eyed about the Kyrgyz Republic. My favorite anecdote is one that I heard from former President Rosa Otunbayeva when she parlayed the anecdote of the origins of the Kyrgyz Republic, that when God had finished handing out parcels of land to all the peoples of all the countries, all the tribes, all the nationalities, there remained this one lone voice saying, wait, what about us? And it was the Kyrgyz people, and God looked down and said, well, for you, I guess I will give you the piece of land that I had reserved for myself. And that such a beautiful story about the beauty and the majesty of the Kyrgyz Republic, and anyone who has traveled in that country, has flown over that country and visited some of these beautiful wonders, can certainly understand the pride that is reflected in that story of its origin. It is a wonderful occasion to be here to celebrate 25 years of Kyrgyz independence, and obviously, as we do that, I also want to congratulate Ambassador Salim on the 25th anniversary of Tajik independence. The United States has been a strong partner to the Kyrgyz Republic and to all the Central Asian republics. We have also are marking 25 years of friendship and partnership between our two countries. We were one of the first to recognize its independence, and our 25 years of partnership have essentially underscored the commitment of the American people to the independence, to the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of the Kyrgyz Republic. And in the span of those 25 years, we have partnered with the Kyrgyz Republic on economic development to the tune of over $2 billion in assistance over the past 25 years. But the Kyrgyz Republic holds a special place, as the ambassador talked about. And he covered quite expansively many of the themes that I would want to underscore, so I won't repeat those, but I will say that because the Kyrgyz Republic is a parliamentary democracy in a region where that is not too common, it does hold a special appeal, a special place in the hearts of Americans and in the hearts of our policymakers. And we have therefore moved to support that democracy and strengthen its democratic institutions. I think since 2010, we have provided to the tune of nearly $100 million in democracy and governance assistance, focused on helping strengthen those institutions and the commitment and the resolve of the Kyrgyz people and the Kyrgyz leaders towards their democracy. So things like parliamentary strengthening, things like assistance on elections, strengthening civil society, working with government on both national and local governance capabilities, capacities, things like that. And that's a very important part of our focus. But we also are strong partners in strengthening economic prosperity. And I think we heard from Orit how American companies are increasingly looking to invest in, to partner with the Kyrgyz Republic, and that is something that's very important to the United States and to the Department of State. It is a time in the region where increasingly we're also looking at the regional aspects and the relations between countries. And the Secretary Kerry last year in a historic trip visited all 5 countries and spent time in Bishkek, particularly engaging not only with the government but also engaging with the youth and with students, and again kind of putting forward that vision of connectivity and stability that can really benefit all of the countries of the region. And we established during that trip, we launched the C5+1 platform, which is a platform for engaging the 5 countries of Central Asia and their foreign ministers in a dialogue with the United States to address areas of common approach on connectivity, on security, on environment. And that, I think, has been kind of a new paradigm in adding to the robust bilateral partnership that we have with the Kyrgyz Republic, a regional lens on how we can support connectivity that can bring about greater economic growth and opportunity for their people, but also address some of the negative aspects of connectivity that concern all of us, aspects such as extremism and terrorism, strengthening border security and strengthening cooperation on addressing security. And so we see the relationship as one that is continuing to evolve and deepen and strengthen. Now, obviously, there will always be times when we don't see eye to eye, and we work together to overcome those issues and to share perspectives and to advance our relations. But as the world looks to Central Asia in the midst of a historic and important transition that we see unfolding in Uzbekistan, we are reminded once again the importance of engaging the countries of Central Asia and in strengthening and supporting their efforts to improve their ties with each other, their economic ties with each other, and the opportunities for their citizens. And we look forward to engaging in that sense in the weeks and months and years to come. But again, I just want to end with a note of the importance that we place on this relationship, and certainly the incredible partnership that we have had with Ambassador Tokorow in his capacity here.
Thank you very much, Nisha. Ambassador O'Keefe, you had the great privilege and actually important temporal period of the new millennium. Your ambassador as Kyrgyzstan and Central Asia made a transition into the 21st century. I wonder how that got shaped your ambassadorship, but we're very much looking forward to hearing your comments from somebody on the ground trying to implement many of the policies that Nisha has outlined for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Fiona. You all hear me, I hope. First, I'd like to congratulate Ambassador Tokorow, people of Kyrgyzstan on their 25th lieutenants, Ambassador Salim, also for Tajikistan. Is that better? Good. I'm with the Open World Leadership Center now, and we work with both of those countries, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. Ambassador Takhtagulov asked if I would have some personal comments, and Fiona has framed it. And I would just also like to tell a small story. I was there when Oscar Akayev was president. President Akayev was a very good partner, very good to work with. But he obviously had from time to time some issues, as any president does. And we were discussing some shortcomings, let us say, with one or two of the heads of ministries. And he would say, well, if I could just get somebody to go in there and straighten this out. And I said, Mr. President, how about Rosa? And he looked at me, and Rosa at the time was ambassador to the UK, and he said, you know, she could probably do it. And then he shook his head. He said, but you know, you can't have a rose without thorns. and it was an interesting relationship because she was very direct with President Akayev. She never said anything to other people, but she was clear about some issues that she thought he might want to address. The arriving there in 2000 and being there on 9/11 was certainly two profound events. And again, as Fiona noted, going to Istanbul, the thing that struck me was the incredible beauty of the country. But also, as we look back today, Kyrgyzstan stands out as the most democratic country in the region, a parliamentary democracy. And I would also congratulate the ambassador and his country on the Nomad Games. I don't know whether any of you saw the clips, but it's certainly something. And I think this is a great, not simply PR, but when you look at it, that setting and the traditions and the participation, this is a launching pad in the sense that Kyrgyzstan can use for some next steps. The other thing I was thinking of too, again in a conversation with President Akayev, talking about how he was managing foreign relations with neighbors and others, and he said, well, you know, the country the size of Kyrgyzstan, he said, we're not a big country. So we want to have friends, and we want all countries to be our friends. And that's, I think, a strategy that becomes quite important right now. Because obviously, there are two things that are fairly significant. The first is that Kyrgyzstan has entered into the EU, has been a member of SHUS for quite some time, involved in C5. And these multinational fora, especially the economic ones, I think, allow the countries of the region to engage in a non-zero-sum game. Because when you think about sometimes when countries do conduct relations with neighbors, it's win or lose. You know, either I get it or you get it, and I want to get it for myself. But in fact, I think with the changes, as the Assistant Secretary mentioned now, and the transition, this may be the best opportunity to move from zero-sum to everybody's a winner. And I really deeply hope that within the region, and through your efforts and through the efforts of the countries in the region, that it can move so that greater prosperity, greater transparency, greater movement among people across borders, I think would go a long, long way to smoothing what holds for the next 25 years. It is, I think, a period of both promise, but also risk. And let's face it, nations, even though President Akayev may have said it, don't have friends, they have interests. And those interests don't always coincide. But I think with certain sorts of, let's say, outreach efforts in the next couple of years during these transitions, because the actuarial charts apply to lots of people, there needs to be a true, profound, and serious effort at getting this moving towards the benefit of all the people in the region. So, at any rate, thank you and congratulations again, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Ambassador O'Keefe. We're now going to turn to Alex Cooley to put everything into a large frame for us. We've heard from Assistant Secretary Bishwal about all of the progress in policy, from Ambassador O'Keefe about some of the challenges, and of course we heard from Ambassador Toktogulov about the many transitions that Kyrgyzstan has gone through. And there are many notable elements in all of this. The very strong stress on education that Kyrgyzstan put very early on. Yourself, Ambassador Toktogulov, being one of the first graduates from the American University in Central Asia, which was located in Bishkek, and a very important part of US policy, not just of non-profit and foundation investment. The reference to Rosa Otunbayeva, who still, with the exception of Yulia Tymoshenko, has been one of the only women heads of state in the former Soviet republics, and very early on as an ambassador, I still worked directly with her, not just to Russia but also to the United Kingdom, one of a real standard bearer for the whole region. Kyrgyzstan stands out in so many different ways, so there's lots of rocky transitions, but Kyrgyzstan has gone through them many times, as well as Ambassador Toktogulov laid out. Alex, how does this look from the perspective of academia? Because we were commenting before we started, it's extremely difficult to be able to engage in in-depth research in the region these days. But Kyrgyzstan always remains open to this, and in fact, President Akayev, who was himself a scientist and a researcher, was always very eager to engage early on, and that has been a pattern that has continued. So Alex, we're very much looking forward to hearing your remarks, and thank you very much for joining us.
Fiona, thanks so very much for that kind introduction. Thank you, Ambassador, for this invitation. Congratulations, distinguished panelists and members of the audience. So, the Ambassador asked me, could you give some remarks, but could you be candid? And inside I was thinking, are you serious? No, I think he really means it. And it's turned out to be just a remarkable exercise for me. Thank you. Because what I realized as I was reflecting on today, I also have my Issachar story, right? My first experience in the country, I flew in 1993. I was an intern for an external financial institution that was making the rounds, very interested in the region, and everyone was blown away, and I fell in love with the country. And what I sort of reflecting on this, what I realized is, this trip became career defining for me. I owe my career, my research interests to Kyrgyzstan, whether it's looking at topics like NGOs, foreign aid relations, administrative legacies. I did a book on foreign military bases, on great power relations, and dynamics of the multipolar world, to some present work I'm doing on offshore networks and relations. I mean, literally every major interest I have. And so this isn't just a matter for me of how I view Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan is the prism through which I look at foreign relations in the world in general, and I'm very grateful for that. And even if we do have some disagreements and some debates, which I think are very healthy. Let me delve into, I think, a couple of contributions that I think Kyrgyzstan, the study of Kyrgyzstan, as Fiona was saying, has given us. And first of all, one point Fiona made that I think is really important. The openness of the country, the accessibility, the people wanting to engage, wanting to give feedback, wanting to debate are just unmatched in the region. And we all tend to write a lot about Kyrgyzstan in proportion to the other countries of the world, of the region, because we can gain access to Kyrgyzstan. And in fact, we can pursue the types of research questions that we're interested in Kyrgyzstan. That's just a tremendous credit to your country. Professionally, as a political scientist, Kyrgyzstan's been called an island of democracy and experimentation. It has been the unique site of 2 regime collapses after popular street protests. It hosted the first female premier in the region who voluntarily gave up power, also a first. To this new experiment in parliamentary democracy, which, despite what all the cynics and skeptics say, really is working with a Kyrgyz flavor and in a different set of dynamics, but you have tremendous young scholars now in Kyrgyzstan, political scientists, who are generating fascinating data about how the political system itself is generating the type of interest representation that it's meant to. And I think what's so fascinating about Kyrgyzstan's political system is that its neighbors, even though Kyrgyzstan is a small country, its neighbors are always looking at what's going on in Bishkek. Right? Sometimes the demonstration effects are something they fear. Sometimes they're concerned about them. But I think in a region, and sometimes the only thing that defines the region is looking at your neighbor and being concerned about what's going on. So it's a tremendous, I think, testament to just the effects in Kyrgyzstan, I think, have gone much, been felt more broadly. I think beyond the political system, the other thing Kyrgyzstan has given us as political scientists and foreign relations analysts is this idea of pursuing a multi-vector foreign policy, right? The idea that Kyrgyzstan might be a small state, but it has agency, it has sovereignty, it is savvy, it understands its interests, as was mentioned before, and it is willing to explore numerous partnerships. In fact, even in the early 90s when I was there to see Kyrgyz officials and diplomats on the same day engage with the Swiss, with the Japanese, with the Turkish, as well as the various EU delegations. From very early on, Kyrgyzstan acquired this capacity to pursue these external partnerships. In some ways, I think and this was even I think before certainly 9/11. I think 9/11 and the U.S. security partnership took it to a different level. But by the mid-2000s, Kyrgyzstan played this remarkable role of being the only country to host a Russian military base, a U.S. military base facility, and it served as China's entrepot via the WTO into the CIS, right? So its territory, its geography, this partnership really made it key for all of these external powers, and but at the same time, a lot of it happened on Kyrgyz terms. Let me say something about the U.S.-Kyrgyz relationship. I think this is where I do want to be candid. I think the base at Manas which became one of my research focuses for over a decade, leaves, I think, a really interesting and important legacy. It was a source of cooperation and partnership, but it was also a source of tensions. And I think very different images regarding the base's function and purposes, and I think these also evolved. I think at heart, after a while, the two sides viewed the base very differently. The U.S. saw it as a transit facility, vital part of the Afghanistan campaign, and I think for a certain Kyrgyz elite and the public, it was viewed as a source of revenues. And for some of the public, rightly or wrongly, it was viewed as a symbol of U.S. acquiescence to the promotion of graft, and in the time of Kiev, authoritarianism. I think there are a couple of lessons that we can take from this on the kind of academic policy front. One is, I think, some of the detrimental effects of unofficial quid pro quo. I think U.S. officials always maintained that they engaged with Kyrgyzstan on a number of different fronts, even when the base was there, and that's true. The problem was that this agreement that was structured, especially in 2006, was the agreement about quid pro quo that wasn't officially about quid pro quo. right? This figure that was given that the U.S. commits to $150 million in support for the Kyrgyz Republic in a separate line than the mentioned by us. What that did, in retrospect, is that it actually linked programs and projects that had nothing to do with the base to understandings about the base, right? Peace Corps being amongst them, because at some point, officials were always calculating how do we get to that 150 million. And I think that delicate dance was unsustainable, and that's one of the things that prompted Kiev's gambit in 2009. So I think another lesson was that the base itself, although its public diplomacy improved greatly after the events of 2010. Before that, this policy of kind of being out of sight and being out of mind was counterproductive. That it allowed, I think, the rumor mill to spiral about what the base was doing and promote sort of these ideas on the Russian language media and so forth, because U.S. base didn't have actually a very good public relations mechanism and strategy, and I think also that's something we can learn from. So to me, the transactional politics that resulted from this, I think, was quite corrosive to the relationship. And I'm so happy to see that the relationship is being repaired. And I think in some ways, the removal of the base offers an opportunity to engage on a wide range of issues without having this instrumentality of keeping access open at the back of everyone's mind. And I think that's actually a great opportunity for relations moving forward. Finally, I just want to point out this area of tensions on the so-called values issues, right? On human rights, on democracy. I think on the Kyrgyz side, you rightly point out that the West and the United States and Brussels, they tend to be very hard on you, especially when compared to your neighbors. And to me, I see that as the real compliment, actually, beyond the substance of our disagreements on some of these issues, in that Kyrgyzstan itself is held to a different standard than other countries. And that's a tribute to your own democracy, to your own engagement, to the public, as you mentioned, not willing to put up with it and stand to it. And I actually see that as very healthy. So I think the fact that friends are able to give critiques to friends, especially on these issues, I think to me is just an indicator of how high the bar is in the country. Going forward, I think this multi-vectorism, while still in operation, is going to be challenged, right? I think there is a perception that the U.S. has withdrawn, whether real or not. I think there's also this issue about whether deepening relations with Russia and China is going to allow political space for other types of engagement. But at the same time, who are we to doubt Kyrgyzstan? And who are we to doubt your capacity and your vision to deal with all of these challenges and opportunities? So, Mr. Ambassador, thank you again for this great honor, for this great invitation, and I wish your country peace, prosperity, and all the best for the next 25 years.